Up next, it's Albi, and he's given himself a pretty hard task here. Amidst rising community tensions and claims that multiculturalism has failed, he's going to pitch a national integration policy. It's time for Albi's argument.
Absolutely right. Look, it's become abundantly clear to me that immigration without integration has been a complete disaster for this country. Whether or not that is the parallel societies that we've seen emerge in our great northern towns like Rochdale, Oldham and Rotherham, or if it's the community tensions that we've seen inflame after the awful war that we're seeing in Israel and Palestine. We're seeing it spill out onto the streets of London, Manchester and Birmingham. It's simply unsustainable for us to continue on this path without a specific government policy on integration. I was pretty horrified to learn that there is not a UK-wide national integration policy. And we've seen these huge levels of migration after the Blair government and continued under subsequent Conservative governments, but no one has stood still and thought, how do we integrate all of these people? How do we make sure everyone rubs along and we have a cohesive, safe and prosperous society? That's why I'm calling for a government focus on integration. Now, what could this look like? I think for prospective immigrants and asylum seekers, at the very least, we should be expecting them to have a basic level of English. I think that all employers that sponsor visas for international workers should have the duty to make sure that their employees are trained in British integration. I think that when people are applying for visas into the United Kingdom, there should be a values-based psychometric test to ensure that the people who are coming to our countries adhere and want to adhere to British values, and we should not be scared of rejecting those who fail. For the rest of society, because it's not just a problem with new immigrants, it's a problem with immigrant communities who have been here for decades, we need to be looking at a statutory duty on local authorities to promote integration and not just social cohesion. And I also think we need a national citizenship service with the express mission of integrating our races, cultures, religions and classes. Now, these are just some ideas about integration for this country. Other people will have other ideas. It's not going to be an easy task. It is going to take time. But there's one thing I am certain of, and that is that multiculturalism will fail unless we have a focus on integration. Darren, I know that you are very passionate about reducing the level of immigration in this country. And I think, look, I agree, immigration has been too high in this country for too long. 1.2 million net migration is not a sustainable number of people. And I'm pro-immigration saying that. But when it comes to the issue of integrating people, are you not shocked that the Conservatives over the last 13 years have not thought, well, maybe we should make a national integration policy?
Do you know what? It reminds me, everything that's just been said there reminds me of when I went up to cover the Batley and Spen by-election, and George Galloway stood in that by-election. And it was the most divisive, race-baiting, religion, foreign conflicts, trying to evoke all of these things. It was genuinely horrible to see, and all the campaigning material was, I just thought, are we campaigning in a part of Britain or in a part of somewhere else? This just feels utterly absurd. So I think you've got an unenviable task on your hands for this national, what was it, NCS, the National
Citizenship Service.
Citizenship Service. Perhaps I do worry about that, but my answer would be, if you stand on Britain's streets like we've seen people do today and shout jihad, 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 I have no idea if I can do that, if that's Ofcom compliant, but if you do that, get out, right? Why are you here? Leave.
But Reem, don't we also have to give people something to buy into? So it's not just a stick. It's also a carrot. We've got to say to people who come to this country, like my grandparents,
well, don't come here if you don't want to buy
your
into
ancestors,
it.
like your ancestors will have done, even though it's probably not that far back to use the word ancestor. But you know what I mean. We've got to give people something positive to buy into, and at the moment we don't have that. Why?
Yes, and what I will say is that there is a huge difference between the generations that have come to this country. So my grandparents came to this country from North Africa, and they came to this country. They felt honoured to come to this country, to work, to contribute to the British economy and to contribute to the labour market. Now, there are far too many people that come to this country now and feel as though it is their right to do so. It is their right to take taxpayer money from other taxpayers through the benefit system. It is their right to enter into social housing. And I think that there is a huge difference there. Now, I would argue the Welfare State acts as a magnet for many of those types of migrants. People don't come to this country anymore the way my grandparents did and think it's an honour to do so, to contribute. They come here because they think they have the right to do so.
Well, Benjamin, I actually met a fellow gay man last weekend who told me that he moved here.
What?
From...
Okay.
He said that he moved here from Greece because he wanted to live in a more diverse and tolerant and open society. And he actually did feel honoured to come to this country. So there are still people that move here, I think, for the right reasons. But how is it that we integrate them better into British society?
I mean, look, first of all, I don't accept what Reem just said. You know, people aren't automatically entitled to the benefits that you or I might be when they get to this country. And immigrants earn more and pay more tax than the average British-born citizen. So if you took them out of the scenario, our economy, our public finances would be in a much worse position. You know, I went to, as Albie did, the London School of Economics, where...
I also went there.
Oh, there we go.
Three LSE alumni on the panel.
And so, as you'll know, 70% of students at that
It's gone up now.
university...
It's 80% when I was there.
...are from countries around the
Yes.
world. It has as many nationalities as the United Nations. And it works fantastically. For me, it's an example of Britain at its best, because you have the talent from around the world coming here. And I think the idea that multiculturalism has failed is wrong, because we have issues, but Britain is a very successful multicultural nation. The kind of problems we have compared to France or America or, heaven forbid, the Middle East, they're nothing like the scale that very similar countries
But
have.
let's be honest, there is a big difference between a bunch of LSE students that have received top grades and are the kids of diplomats and mass immigration that we're seeing at the moment. There is a big difference.
I'd say one thing, which is that I think you should have to learn English. You know, I remember when I've gone round Tower Hamlets, and you have women in particular there who have lived here for many decades and they've never learned the language and they don't have agency to look after themselves and they're not integrated.
Leo,
and I think that should change.
Leo,
what's your view on this
briefly?
No, I think Reem covered it. I mean, when you look at LSE, you're not taking a representative sample at all. It's ridiculous. And for multiculturalism, for you to say it's been a success, what about grooming gangs? What about terrorist bombings? What about the riots we're seeing today?
Well, most people that have been grooming, that have been convicted in this country, are white British men. So isn't it your fault?
It's an 87% white country, or at least it was last time somebody checked. I should imagine with the people coming across the channel unchecked, that's changed. But so you'd expect over 50% of the grooming gangs or the organised paedophiles to be white in an 87% white country. We're talking about proportionality. You've got a tiny proportion of the population vastly overrepresented in this most horrific crime. And I think it's sick that the left has covered it up. And that's why the left lost me, to be honest.
I think Britain is a lot richer for its multiculturalism.